Welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon Framework, Axon Server, and their ecosystem. I am your host and the producer of this podcast, Sara. In this episode, my guest Arjan talked about his new event modeling tool, Model My Code. He explained how to use it and where to get it from. He discussed why it is important to, as he puts it, make design center stage again, as well as the importance of outcome-driven discovery sessions. Arjan's tool will be available as a public beta next week. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and let's have a listen. Hi, Arjan. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. It's my pleasure. It's a beautiful day here in New Zealand, so I'm all in the mood.
Fantastic. And you're already a day ahead of me. I hope your yesterday was good. Your today is even better. Fantastic. Yeah. Arjan, can you tell everybody about who you are? And of course, you're in New Zealand, but if you'd like to talk about your background and what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, that's no problem. So I was born in the Netherlands and raised there in the neighborhood of Rotterdam. Mm-hmm. And I've always been in IT. I started my first company when I was 18 years old. So was in there pretty early with the VIC-20, Commodore 64, all those awesome machines. And I couldn't get enough of it. So I really kept going. And since that period, I've been designing software, programming, doing every aspect of the software lifecycle. Met my wife as my secretary. So, yep. And after 5 years circling around each other, because it's no thing going out with your secretary, we decided to marry finally and have 3 children by now. And about 15 years ago, we decided to move to New Zealand because it was a little bit crowded in the Netherlands. Yeah. And especially as a small company, it was not always easy. And we thought New Zealand is the land of opportunities. Mm-hmm. And indeed, it has been perfect over here. It's an amazing country to stay. Definitely don't go there if you think you can avoid your problems, because you take your problems with you. Exactly. But it's a country where there are options to resolve them or enter new problems, as we discussed earlier.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have been the victim of the bad weather that you people perhaps have heard about. And at the moment, we're not allowed in our house. So interesting times, but overall, no regrets of moving here. And it's, even for IT, it's a perfect place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry about the situation. I really hope that you get back to your home and everything gets resolved without any damages. So
yes.
we'll hope for that, for sure. So Arjan, you did explain that you've been in IT for a really long time, which will explain a lot of what you do now. But I kind of want to find out about how you actually got interested in the current consultancy services that you offer. And if you don't mind, do talk about that. And talk a little bit about what those are and maybe where your interest came to sort of develop for these topics. And also, has it been what you had hoped for? Okay, and I'm specifically talking about, things like domain-driven design and event sourcing and sort of these architectural concepts that we're talking about. Tell me a little bit about that.
So about a year ago, after spending most of my life what I describe as a product lifecycle coach, so spending time in every aspect of the software lifecycle, I decided a year ago that it was time for me to put my words in action and start a company called EBD Connect. And this company is focused on making life for event-driven architecture easier. Yeah, I think
Okay.
there's a lot of talk in our circuit around event driven is hard. It's really hard. And I
Hmm.
think that scares off a lot of people without the need for it. I think
Yeah.
there are opportunities to simplify things.
Hmm.
And specifically around event sourcing and CQRS type of architectures, I think with the occurrence of event modeling by Adam Dimitrik, there's a real opportunity there to make it quite easy for new people to get into the vibe of event driven architecture.
Absolutely.
So, um, after I spent 2 years before EBD Connect building up a whole CQRS event sourcing framework and working with Exonic to
Yeah.
actually implement an
Right.
event sourcing environment. Um, I was so enthusiastic about that approach that I decided, hey, I know there are a couple of tools and everybody's using Miro and Jira. Sorry, what's the other one? The
Oh,
drawing
note.
tool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And but it's not quite there. You
Hmm.
still need to spend a lot of time, and
Right.
especially when you get to the point that you have to change something, then it
Right.
is a disaster. And often people choose not to model it anymore, or to start all over again.
Right.
And I spent in 2000, already beginning 2000, I did my own event modeling, but in a
Okay.
quite different way. It was called a model-driven environment, and we used so-called Petri nets to model the messages, the tokens, stateful
Okay.
tokens moving
Hmm.
between tasks. So that was already an early start for me in that area. And I knew that you can simplify the situation by looking at small pieces of a process. And event modeling by Adam allows you to do that. It actually
Right.
zooms in on a simple stream, no decisions, so that allows for a very clear view on what you're trying to achieve. But still,
Right.
that problem was there of that barrier of the tooling. So I
Hmm.
decided that, hey, I'll start with a new tool that allows you to model and hopefully also do some code generation, because all the scaffolding, repeating all the same patterns over and over is quite a challenge.
Yeah.
But what I found was that if you actually apply event modeling, there are a couple of concepts missing from my perspective.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Tell me
that's
about
where,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where I started to look, of course, at domain driven design. Yeah. But my problem with domain driven design is it's way too technical. It's
Right. Right.
not a tool that I think is very suitable to talk with business people. But event modeling sort of is. There's a little
Yeah.
bit of noise in the background,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
people can understand it.
Hmm.
So started looking at event storming, as Adam suggests. That's actually the first step that you should be doing.
Hmm.
But even the official event storming methodology is talking about systems, yeah,
Right.
and
Right.
trying actually to do the work for our technical people,
Hmm.
not the work for the business people.
For the business side. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the business side needs to be represented more. And I even challenge the word event,
Yeah.
because if you talk about events with business people, they say, "Oh, where's the wedding?" or "Where do we have drinks?" Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Exactly.
thinking. Yeah,
It has a
so
different meaning to them, a
yeah,
different context. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So I constantly came across that when I told hey, people, "Hey, I've got a new business and I'm doing event-driven design." I thought, "Oh, I've got somebody that's organizing parties. Could you perhaps solve the problems for them?"
Oh, I can see how that can change so quickly, that
Yeah,
conversation.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So I still don't have the right word. I'm thinking about process triggers, business
Hmm.
triggers, something like that. I'm still searching. So please, people, if you got the right word, tell me.
Yeah.
But anyways, I started with the principles of it needs to be completely technology agnostic what I'm doing,
Hmm.
using terminology that business people can understand. And
Okay.
if we have the need for technical details, we should be able to hide it. Yeah.
I like that. Okay.
So overall, my vision is to significantly improve execution of business strategy by
Mhm.
using what I call outcome-driven knowledge modeling.
Okay.
Yeah. So most importantly, outcome-driven, not
Hmm.
event-driven, outcome-driven.
Outcome driven. Yeah.
And then outcome is defined as what changes people's behavior. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm not
Yep.
looking for outcomes of systems, because if they have outcomes but people don't change their behavior, what's the value?
It
There
doesn't
is none.
change. Right. It doesn't
Exactly.
change the
So
outcome.
that's the
Yeah.
starting point for me. So, first of all, you have the discussion. Can you describe me what your outcome of the project is?
I really like that because it's so much easier to understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, most customers can't
Huh. Okay.
because they don't agree on the outcome. Yeah.
Is it that they don't agree within the team or teams, or just as an organization they can't agree?
As an
The
organization.
outcome is
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
And it actually shows the biggest danger of a normal approach where you start with solutioning and trying to find requirements,
Yep.
because then people, each individual is starting to make up the outcome in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
which will
Mm-hmm.
probably not be the same of the other person sitting right next to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bring that out in the beginning to
Mhm.
have clarity around outcomes. And if they can't define it, then I'll ask, how would you measure that you've been successful?
Okay.
Again, looking from your customers or your internal customers. Yeah.
Right.
So the funny thing is, if they describe what the outcome, the measurable outcomes are, they are describing events.
Right.
This must have happened to get to this
To get
outcome.
there. Right. Yeah.
So what I'm doing is then saying, okay, so those are the key business
Hmm.
events that we're looking for, business triggers.
Yeah.
How did we get the information that sits inside that event,
Hmm.
which is dependent on events that happened earlier?
Right.
So
Exactly.
I'm working backwards.
Yeah.
And by working backwards, I always work with what I know, not with what I don't know. And in
Hmm.
one go, I remove all the communication problems that we have currently with Agile, where we
Hmm.
do iterations to figure out where we're wrong.
I see. So in this case, then, in order to determine the outcome, would you look at the data to determine what that outcome is, and then go backwards to look at what events would have co- uh, basically produced those outcomes?
Yes, in a so I call them facts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
what actually happens is when an event occurs, it's where information is turned into knowledge.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
because and that's where another aspect what for me is missing in event modeling. In what context?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's actually really interesting you mentioned the context. We were doing a workshop with Allart a few
yeah,
weeks ago here in Houston, actually. And it was the first event modeling session that I had done with people that came from various companies and backgrounds. And we had very technical people, and we
yeah,
had non technical people. And they all had come into the same room, and we were talking about this particular application that we wanted to create. And we were in the process of this event storming part of event modeling. And it was very interesting because even though we had given them the outcome, so we had told them, okay,
yeah,
this is what we want to have at the end. How do we get there? Um, the kind of events basically that each individual was coming up with, for the most part, was it within the context, because we had sort of given them the outline ish
yeah,
of the context. But it was interesting because a few people were suggesting things that could have been in this context, but they were not exactly fitting in the context. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that context, when it's defined, it helps to understand
yes,
this events, these facts, this outcome. But even if it's a little bit blurry, it can actually cause a lot of interesting situations,
Yes,
so to
yes, and that's
speak.
where
Yeah,
ubiquitous language pops up, of course.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
talked about that too. We're like, oh, now we're talking about language. And this
yeah,
is
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
with my tool, the first step that you're taking after defining the outcome is you can do the event storming, but what I actually prefer is then you define the context, and there can be
Right.
multiple contexts.
Hmm.
And then you can put timelines in the system,
Yeah.
and where you can say, okay, this timeline represents a flow of events, yeah, which have a system outcome,
All
yeah,
right.
and not the final outcome, but the system outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And you place those timelines in the context that you want to use. So you
Okay.
visually see these timelines and these events belong in this context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
And only when you've got events in a timeline, in a context, you are allowed to create an event model.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because an event model is zooming in on one timeline. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And then in that timeline, you can pull in events from other timelines as triggers, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you see how there are dependencies between timelines
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
how there are dependencies between contexts.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. And one other aspect that I haven't mentioned yet is that I also assign a owner
Mm-hmm.
to an event. Who is
Okay.
responsible for this event to happen?
And is it an owner in terms of a system owns this event or
No,
context or
a
oh,
person or a
person. Okay.
department. Yeah.
Ah,
So
very
it's an
good. Okay.
actor.
Aha. I see. I see.
Yeah. And
Yep.
so I can say kitchen is responsible for this event, and drivers are responsible, or driver is responsible for this event.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the funny thing is, if you then press a button,
Mhm.
you can generate 80% of your event model in one go,
I see.
because you see a line of all the events. You have defined them with the past tense, which I check with natural language processing that
Yeah.
it's actually past tense and that you
Right.
have not mistaken you and put it in future tense or whatever.
Right.
And then you only need to decide, do I want to create a interface? Are people entering the information,
Mhm.
or is it automation? Those are the only two choices that you have to make.
Right.
And
That's
when
really
you
great because then you can really wireframe it or figure out if it's a third party system and so be it.
exactly,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Nice. Okay.
I don't have to type in all the names anymore, because from the past tense I generate what the future tense is. So I create the name of the command, I create
Command,
the name of
exactly.
the interface, I
Right.
create the name of the query.
Oh, that's fantastic. That makes it
Yeah,
so much easier. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the other reason why I'm doing it like that, I want to move away. The one part where I slightly disagree with Adam is the storytelling, because
Okay.
storytelling pushes you to the solution side of things,
I see.
where you start to come up with, I think we need this, I think we need that.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if you start with the event and the facts in the event, you know what you need. The
Right.
only thing you
Exactly.
don't know is, how do I
How
get
to
those
get there.
facts?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that event modeling is meant to focus on how the interface looks like.
Right.
Yeah. And my experience from using event modeling, it was people basically it becomes a UX exercise. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everybody starting to talk about the interface, the wireframing, etc. Wireframing is the last 20% of your solution,
I see.
because it's just how you get your facts in the system.
So as opposed to basically focusing on it from the beginning, focusing on the UI UX from the beginning, you kind of focus on the facts and focus on the outcome. And then at the end, once you have determined
That it
all
works.
of the important, yeah, parts, Then you figure out
Yeah,
where is your user interface, where do you need to wireframe
yeah,
really, where do you go to party systems. Okay,
yeah,
all right.
and that's actually the part where solutioning comes in, because that's where
Mhm.
with creative UX you can improve how efficiently you get that information. But before that, you've built up what I call the knowledge model, that you
Yeah,
can actually, you have no longer unknown unknowns. Yeah.
right,
The
right.
biggest disruption when you're building systems using event modeling, or perhaps event driven architecture in general, is that you find, oh, I'm missing that piece of information. Or I used the wrong name because the source is completely different than I thought. And
I
then
see.
you need to start fiddling around and refactoring and new schemas and
Mhm.
migrations, etc. Well, if you start at the back and move backwards,
Yeah.
at that point, you already know everything. You've already discussed all the terminology.
Mhm.
So that's way more fixed. And you actually know that all information is available.
Right.
So you can
So
test your whole system.
exactly. Now, say your outcome changes,
Yeah,
and because sometimes it does, many
yeah.
times it does, right? Do you then do this whole process over, or is it sort of like a live model and it's a living model that you have to keep going and checking to see where you need to make improvements and when you need to make adjustments?
Uh,
What is your process in those
yeah.
situations?
So I'm hoping for that it's a live model, but
Yeah.
it depends how you do the code generation. So that's the second part of my tool. It's basically a, a low code or a tool environment
Hmm.
where I'm not generating the code. I'm just providing the information of the meta model,
Right.
and I provide that information to generators that use templates.
Okay.
And that means that you can use any language.
Mhm.
Sorry, not just Exonic and Java,
I mean, yes, of course.
but
We
that's the
we we like a language agnostic as well.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, as with signups, you're definitely going there. So yeah,
Yes, you exactly hit it right on the head. That's
yeah, yeah.
right.
So what I'm providing is a mapping of the data types to your
I see.
language system.
Hmm.
And then how you generate your code is up to you.
It's up to
I'm
you.
not,
Right.
with my tool, I'm not touching the code.
Right. Right.
So if you write code in the right architecture,
Yeah.
that means that you can have a two-way connection. Because if
Hmm.
you know the template, you can investigate the code and get it back to the model. But
Okay.
what I
Right.
think is way more important, and it was one of the things that I discovered using event modeling, is the fact that an organic architecture is really possible
Mm.
if you make the event the most important part in your system.
Right.
Do everything from an event. And that's what
Hmm.
I almost enforce in the tool. If you don't
Yeah.
have an event, you can't do anything.
Hmm.
And the biggest mistake that I was doing in the past is because of dry principles, been hammered into you. Don't repeat yourself. So I'm trying to reuse events. And
Yeah.
that's the worst case scenario
Right.
that you can have.
Because you're not
Yeah.
dry.
Yeah. So, what I really believe in is that with the context, I'm not copying an event. No, I'm creating a new event that
Hmm.
is a virtual representation of that external event. So I
I
force
see.
people to have new events for everything. So
Mhm.
if your outcome changes, it means you introduce new events.
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
And, or of course, your schema can be extended, but then the benefit of the tool is because you've got it in the tool, schema versioning is automatically built in.
Okay.
More
Nice.
importantly, the history of the event schemas is
Exactly.
there, so you
Exactly.
can have generators that help you create migration tools.
Hmm. Nice. That's
Yeah.
that's very exciting. There was actually I was attending one of Adam's meetups a couple months ago, and
Yeah.
somebody asked about your tool, and
Oh.
Adam said, "I don't know if cat's out of the bag yet. I don't know if we can talk about this." And I said, "I think it is." So,
Yeah.
is it available for folks to use it? If so, where can they find it? And I can also add it in the show notes. But what stage are we in?
Yeah. So of course, due to all the disruption in the last month,
Yeah.
we've slowed down a little bit. But the good thing is that actually we're hoping to start with the beta next week.
Oh,
So
fantastic. Good
yes,
timing. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
perfect timing. Yeah, yeah. Um, so I'm busy with the last bit of refactoring,
Mhm.
and when it comes out, it will be in the format of a free version and a professional version and something more for organizations.
Okay.
So the element that's still missing is the collaboration
Mhm.
aspect, which
Okay.
I've got
Hmm.
specific ideas around.
Okay.
So to test that first. But once the tool comes out, it will be provided with an example template to use with Exonic,
Okay. All
with
right.
Exonic, and there will be an example to work with a TypeScript environment.
Nice.
So people can see, okay, this is an example of how I can do code generation. My emphasis in the beginning is really on the building the models and see if that works as expected.
Okay.
The other
Mm-hmm.
limitation will be it's English only for now
Mm-hmm.
because natural language processing in other languages is not that easy to find.
Sure, sure, sure. No, I understand. So, what should folks expect? Do they, let's say well, first of all, where do they find it? Is it on your website or
Yeah, yeah.
is it on
So
GitHub? Where do they go?
there's a link through ebdconnect.com,
Okay,
but
great.
the direct direction would be to go to app.modelmycode.com, which
Okay,
is the name of the tool, Model My Code.
very nice. I will share that in the notes as well. And so, what should somebody expect if I go in there and I download the app? Will it give me some kind of onboarding guidance where to go and how to do it? Basically,
I'm hoping that very little guidance is necessary, but
fantastic. That's what I like to hear.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But there will be some hints on how to use the tool. But again,
Hmm.
I think that's where Adam made a brilliant um modeling technique. It's just so straightforward. Once you know the
Yeah.
basic principles, there's nothing more to it.
Hmm.
And it's the
Perfect.
same, hopefully, with my tool that you set up a project, you start with building your events, timelines, and contexts, and then you press a button and you
And
start your
voila,
event model. Done.
there you are. Very good. Okay. So the three things you need to know is your events, your timeline, and your context, and
Ye-
you should be
yes,
good
and
to
then
go.
perhaps actors.
Of
The
course.
you can just use the default actor. You don't
Hmm.
need to use it, but it's the
Okay.
same as in event modeling. It's the lanes above that decides, do I am I interested that it's an anonymous user in this stage of the line, and then I move to a logged in user? Is it a third party integration, etc., etc.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so exciting, Ariane. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it since
Yeah, I know,
when
I
was it?
know.
Before September, and
Yeah,
yeah, you and I had a good conversation on that in Amsterdam. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens next week and playing with it and
yeah,
introducing it to others. That's really fantastic. Now, if anyone has questions or if they're playing around with it and they need some support,
yeah,
do you offer that? Where can they reach you?
yeah. So
Oh,
there will be a chat in the tool,
okay,
so
great.
they can use that. But otherwise,
Perfect.
always an email at arjan@modelmycode.com or arjan@ebdconnect.com
Mhm.
will always
Fantastic.
reach me. Be aware that perhaps during the middle of your day, I won't be answering at that point
You'll
in
be
time.
asleep. Yes.
Yeah, but I've actually already made contacts to set up support in the Europe time zone. So once we
Excellent.
get going, then there should be 24/7 support available.
Awesome. That's really exciting. This is really great stuff. So yeah, definitely we'll share all of the links in the notes and again looking forward to seeing it in action next week. Really happy
Mhm.
that I got the chance to talk to you. I know we had difficulty with everything that's happening in New Zealand and
Yeah,
with your home. I really hope for the best, and I hope you get back to your own house and just your routine as soon as
yeah.
possible. But I really appreciate you spending the time with me today.
It was really good. As you noticed, I love talking about this,
Of
so
course.
it's my passion. And thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Great talking to you as always, and hope to chat again soon. Have a
All
good
right,
one.
bye.
Thank you for listening to my talk with Arjan. I hope you give his tool a try. And please join me next time as I speak with wonderful guests about amazing topics. Until then, have a great time and happy coding!